Hi everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove, and I'm here today with another video. This time taking a look at the complete Witchblade volumes 1 and 2, the hardback editions. So these are the latest collections of the classic Witchblade series from Top Cow and Image Comics. They started out as Kickstarter campaigns, which is a little bit unusual compared to most collected editions that I buy anyway. In that, you know, it wasn't just something that Image solicited and released. It needed to be basically funded through Kickstarter campaigns. Luckily, they got the amount that they needed to put these out, these first 2 volumes, and hopefully the line continues. There's no word yet on a volume 3, but you know, fingers crossed we get that. So these are nice looking books. If we take a look at them, they are standard sized. These nice cover images on the front are quite nice, they stand out nicely. On the back, again, you know, similar designs. So what you get in volume 1, if we have a look at that, that covers the first 19 issues of Witchblade, and then you also get the first 4 issues of Tales of the Witchblade, which is kind of a companion series that told stories of the Witchblade's past, and a couple of crossover issues with the Darkness. That's volume 1. Volume 2, as you'd expect, obviously, just kicks things off from where volume 1 ends, basically. So now you get issues 20 to 36 of Witchblade, Tales of the Witchblade 4 to 8, which actually, is that possibly a slight typo there? Because you should get the first 4 issues of Tales of the Witchblade in there, but this one also says it kicks off with issue 4 of Tales of the Witchblade. Yeah, I haven't looked into that to check on that, but interesting. Either I'm misunderstanding what it means or it's some kind of typo. But anyway, yeah, so that, and then the Witchblade Infinity one-shot and Witchblade Darkness half issue, issue half, however you want to call it, and 1. And Darkness Witchblade 1 and Darkness 28, so quite a bit of crossover stuff with the Darkness in the second volume. These are standard size hardcover books, by the way, so they're not oversized. As a point of quick comparison, if we just get it next to an omnibus, you can see it's a little bit smaller and not quite as big overall. You know, not that there's a huge difference, it's just slightly smaller, but it's not oversized. I would personally prefer it if they'd made these to be oversized, but it's not the end of the world. Next thing, probably worth pointing out, I don't know if any of you watching will have had it before, but the last time these were collected, these issues in any kind of substantial collection, to my knowledge, was in the hardcover and paperback cover versions of the compendiums. So they did these kind of really big thick books that collected 50 issues in each. So the first one had the first 50 issues of Witchblade, the second one had the issues 51 to 100 of Witchblade. They were massive books. I had them at one point and the binding sucked so bad on those books. Honestly, out of all the books I've bought in the years I've been collecting, by far those Witchblade compendiums had the very worst binding. They practically fell apart on me. I sold them for next to nothing in the end, just because I just didn't want to keep them. But the binding on here is considerably improved. If we just take a quick look, if I can show it off, it does appear to be sewn binding. Just about made that out. But honestly, as you flick through these books, I've had no issues, at least on my versions of these. There's no kind of cracking, no feeling whatsoever that the book is fragile and could fall apart, which I think is important, because based on my experience with the last time I collected these stories, that was a key concern for me, and I'm very happy to say that so far, at least, having read through this book once and just started on 2, I've not noticed any problems. So what is Witchblade, for anyone unaware? It's started out in the mid-90s, I think 1996, 95 and 96, by Top Cow Comics, created by Mark Silvestri, Michael Turner, David Wall, I think is his name. It stars or features NYPD detective Sarah Pezzini. And she basically comes into contact with this ancient artifact, supernatural artifact that is the Witchblade. And it's a kind of gauntlet that attaches to her arm and gives her a kind of ambiguous set of powers, to be honest. It seems to be not entirely clear at times exactly what it does, but generally it basically powers her up, makes her stronger, makes her kind of more agile. She has this kind of rapid healing factor while she's wearing it. And there's a kind of symbiotic relationship between the two. So the Witchblade is this ancient artifact. Throughout history, it's bonded to different users. It always bonds to women, so it always has a kind of female host or partner. Don't really know how you best describe that. And Sarah is just the latest in that long line. And so it kind of chooses her as to be its host. And she's just kind of trying to figure out what the hell this thing is, and it kind of just throws a wrench in her life and makes things very complicated. And these early issues kind of just deal with how she's trying to manage her life, her job as a detective, whilst also keeping this thing, mostly secret, whilst she herself doesn't understand it. And then they've got this guy who's the key antagonist early on, called Kenneth Irons. He's a kind of billionaire crime boss. And he wants the Witchblade for himself, and he's kind of he's been tracking it down for decades. So she comes into conflict with him. He tries to kind of sort of trick her, manipulate her. Really cool artwork in here, though. What I've not even mentioned so far is the amazing Michael Turner art that you get through here. Michael Turner, such a great artist, had such a unique style. And, real sad loss that we lost him so many years ago now, and he was just too young to go, as I say, sadly missed. And every time I see his artwork, I can't help but feel a little bit sad to think that, we don't see any more of his artwork anymore. But what we've got from him is obviously all great stuff. Not all the artwork in here is by him, though. The main issues of Witchblade are, but some of the other stuff, like the Tales of the Witchblade, tends to be other artists like can't even think at the moment. Tony Daniel. Yeah, Tony Daniel's the other key one. I think that you see quite a bit of in here. It's a fun story, though. These aren't. I'm not going to say they're all-time classic comics. They're not up there with some of the best stuff you can ever read. But certainly, for me, I'd say it's a good bit of fun to read it. It's kind of very cheesy. Very kind of... it's got a lot of kind of classic tropes in there. Stuff that you might not necessarily enjoy. There's quite a lot of sort of cheesecake art or bad girl art. Quite a lot of sort of gratuitous stuff with Sarah herself. The Witchblade has a tendency to kind of rip her clothes to pieces when it activates, which kind of ridiculous. And you can say that's the sort of stuff that's really just in there to sort of draw in the male audience a little bit. But there is it's not something I would say you should judge it purely on that element of the artwork. I think that would be unfair, because there is a genuinely kind of intriguing story and mystery element to the stuff going on in here. I think so anyway. Like I say, it's not, I'm not going to go and say it's the best story ever, but it's a book that I enjoy reading it. I've read it before a few years ago, and I enjoyed rereading this stuff again recently. And these books are really nice. I've got to put that out there and just say that I think, even though they're not oversized, these are probably the kind of best quality collections of this material that there's ever been. if only because the binding isn't falling apart. And that's a small bar for it to have to reach for me to give it a seal of approval, but that's how bad those compendiums were. I hated those things, really did. So yeah, for me this is a huge improvement, and I just hope that they continue and keep on collecting it. Let's say I'm actually not particularly hopeful that they will, I'm sorry to say, but the fact that they've had to get kind of funding for it from Kickstarter campaigns to manage to produce these books suggests to me that, I don't know, there isn't as high a chance of them completing the series with future volumes as, say, Marvel or even DC printing, you know, oversized hardcovers and omnibus. But I could well be wrong. I did see a comment, I think it was on a Top Cow YouTube video, where somebody actually asked them how many volumes they expect to release, assuming they do the whole thing, and they said it was going to be about 8 or 9 volumes. So, you know, I'm thinking that's optimistic to think we might end up with a full 8 or 9 volumes to collect the entire classic Witchblade series, but, you know, hope I'm wrong. But even if they do all come out, and we do end up with 8 or 9 volumes, I think it's safe to say right now it will be years before we get them all, just based on the rate of how quickly these have come out. So I think the first volume came out around this time last year. This second volume came out sometime in the last month or two. You know, so they're taking, if we go that many months between the books, then it'd probably be at the very earliest sometime at the end of this year or early next year before we see a volume 3, and then most of next year until volume 4 and so on. So, you know, if you're looking at 8 or 9 volumes, just mathematically speaking, probably at least 4 or 5 years until we see the full thing, if we ever do. And that's the only thing I can really say is a bit of a negative about this. It's just that for me, I'm not convinced we'll get much more of it. I just hope I'm wrong on that one. But at the very least, we've got these 2 volumes. You start to see other artists appear in the series from this point onwards. Michael Turner drew the first 24 issues or 25 issues of Witchblade before moving on, and other artists came in, took over the regular art duties. Artwork does tend to be a bit of a mixed bag, following on from Michael Turner, in my opinion. For example, you know, the stuff we're seeing here, I don't think it's as strong as Turner's work. But I think Michael Turner just had a particularly unique style. You know, to this day, it's immediately identifiable when you see something he drew. If you know his work, pretty much recognize it immediately when you see it. A lot of this artwork in here just tends to look like more of the typical mid to late 90s artwork that so many artists were kind of mimicking, that particular style. Not to say it's all bad at all, you know, there's some cool stuff in here, definitely. But you know, you just lose a bit of that uniqueness when it's not Michael Turner anymore. But definitely a good couple of collections, and hopefully this overview provides a bit of insight into the style of the series, you know, and kind of what it looks like, and, you know, even more like just whether or not you're interested in these 2 collections. If you're familiar with Witchblade already, you might have been eyeing these up. Well, whether or not you're familiar with Witchblade, you might have been eyeing these up. And I can just say, for what it's worth, I think if you're interested, probably do go for it, just because I think the other thing about these books to take note of is that they probably won't stay in print for very long. You know, I hate to fan the flames of FOMO, you know, fear of missing out. I don't want to make anybody panic by them, but I just think that, again, based on the nature of how these books have been released, I think quite possibly, very possibly, once they go out of print, that may well be it. Again, something I hope I'm wrong about, but just based on my experience with these sort of more kind of niche appeal books, you know, things with, admittedly, it's got a cult following, I think, Witchblade, but I don't think it has any kind of mass appeal to the extent where these books are going to be coming back into print regularly. We'll see, obviously, if I'm wrong on that. I'll eat my words, but I think if you have any interest, it's probably safer for you to just try and get a hold of them whilst you can. I had a tough time tracking down this second volume, and it's not even been out that long. It's been out of stock in most places I tend to look at. And then I just happened to find it on one particular site recently, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to get it now, because if I miss it here, I have a feeling I might miss out on it permanently. Yeah, so that's a look through Witchblade, complete Witchblade volumes 1 and 2. Hopefully that's been useful, insightful, interesting, all of the above. But yeah, thank you very much for watching as always. This has been a shorter video than normal. I said it wasn't meant to be a full review by any means, but just a look through these books for anyone who's interested. And that's hopefully what I've managed to do. So thank you very much for watching. Please drop a like on the video or comment below if you have anything you want to add, you know, on anything I've said, or just your thoughts on these books or this series in general. And please subscribe if you enjoy my videos. But other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you with the next video.